it started off with the WIOCC getting involved with me. At the time, I didn't really know about the WIOCC because I just mentioned that I had this problem where I found that I'd written to the Home Office about my situation, and they'd written back to me to say that I must leave the country because if not, they would deport me. And this was a bit of a shock. I told my friends about it, and they spread the word around the community. Because for people, they were stunned, and I don't know if people remember, but at the time we'd had this woman called the Iron Lady come to power and say that we were being swamped by immigrants. And obviously I didn't see myself as an immigrant. I'd grown up with a lot of the people here and so on, but that was the situation that I'd found myself in. And unbeknownst to me, when it was broadcast about my situation, Barry at the WIOCC took the decision that we're going to keep this one. He said to me years later after we got together. But apparently they had a meeting, and I believe Whit Stennett, Ozzie Smith, Barry, Gus John, and a few others decided that they were going to fight this campaign. And I was contacted, and a campaign team was set up on my behalf. And he basically mobilized the rest of the community to write letters and campaign on my behalf. And it went national. Ozzie Smith and Whit Stennett went to see the MP in Stretford, where I lived at the time, Winston Churchill, the grandson of Winston Churchill, the war leader. And they impressed upon him that I was a local lad, and that the community wanted me to stay, and they wanted me to stay, and he needed to work and act on my behalf to ensure that happened, and he agreed to do that. I went to see him at his surgery, and he agreed to do that, and so he wrote to the Home Office on my behalf. I think the Home Secretary at the time, or the Minister responsible, was David Waddington, and they got a letter back after all these letters that they'd had from various people around the country, petitions, even from Scotland and all sorts. I don't know how Barry did it, but he had a network all over the country, and he was just able to mobilise everyone with Whit and Ozzie and others to ensure that the decision was changed. And then I got to hear that they changed the decision and decided that I could stay. And I think at the time they were saying that it had been unheard of, that under Margaret Thatcher, that they thought that wasn't going to happen. But obviously they had someone with a different determination in Barry and the others that were around, Gus and Whit and so on, that she decided that I was going to be an exception. So that's why I'm still here. I didn't know the WIOCC at the time. It was very much in the background. I didn't know how active they were. It's only years later that I think it was a member of the Jamaica Society, which is a part of the WIOCC, called Joy Doyley. This is about 15 years later. She just happened to say, would I like to come along to some of the meetings at the Jamaica Society? WIOCC stands for West Indian Organisations Coordinating Committee, and there are 6 affiliated groups. There's the Jamaica Society, the Trinidad and Tobago Association, the Barbados Association, the Leeward Islands People's Association, the Grenada Association, and the Guyanese Association. And these 6 West Indian organisations elect representatives to this coordinating committee. And the term coordinating committee, I found out from Barry, comes from the civil rights era in the US, where each city had its own coordinating committee when they were fighting for civil rights for black people. And so the same philosophy was adopted here, in that the WIOCC was meant to be a political organisation championing and fighting for the rights of black people in Greater Manchester. The WIOCC, as I said, was the coordinating committee. So, and one of the things that it did was manage the West Indian Centre, and it raised the funds and employed a warden, it was called, an old term, but it meant the person who led the centre, and that was Berry. And so his responsibilities then was to make sure that the centre was used by all the affiliated groups. At the time, within the city, black people were being excluded from a lot of the social venues, and he felt it was very important that we have our own venue, we have our own place, and it was one of the few West Indian Centre, if not the only West Indian Centre, that was wholly owned by the committee. Most West Indian centres around the country are leased or are owned by the council, and here was the West Indian Centre in Manchester that was managed, owned by the WIOCC. And his responsibility as well was to work with the underprivileged young. So he established Saturday schools where he used to take a van and with his friends collect the local children and bring them to the centre, where they were given extra lessons in maths, English, and so on, because at the time the education of young black children was found wanting. I mean, it probably still is. They've got Ofsted now that will investigate why a school isn't doing so well and try to up standards. But in that time, children were just failing. Children who were quite bright in the Caribbean came here and was put to the back of the class, so to speak. And so Berry again mobilised people and got people to help to teach children so that their educational outcomes will be better. And I've met many adults who attest to that, you know, they were able to get a better education, get on in life much better because of the Saturday school that he had developed, and through even that good work, there were always difficulties that he'd faced with the local authorities, and I remember once when he said that he wanted to leave a legacy that people understand that the struggles that he had had would always be repeated, and so we ought to be aware. And he charged that I should go to Trinidad and meet with one of the founders of the West Indian Centre, called Roy Neverston. And I was able to do that one year with Altie Daniel, and we went down and we spoke to Roy Neverston and got his stories about what happened, how he used to work with Berry at the time. And he gave an account that the local authority would always stand in the way of various things and try to block, and it would be a constant fight. And if I was going to be involved in the West Indian Centre, I needed to be aware of that. And what I found extremely helpful was the guidance and the history that people like Roy Neverston and Berry gave me to make me aware as to what they had gone through. And then when I got more involved, I started to see the things that they talked about. Well, I wasn't involved in the with the WIOCC when I think you're talking about the fire that had happened in I think it was the New Cross massacre. Yes, I wasn't involved in the WIOCC then. I think my tenure started in about 97, and they thought, well, we're going to put him to work now. So they because they'd campaigned for me to be here, and a few of the older heads got together and decided that they were going to make me chairman. So, and I thought, me chairman? I mean, you've got Barry here that knows and is respected, knows all the things about the community, but his view was that they needed to pass on the knowledge to a younger person. So it was quite different, really. That sometimes in other organisations you get the feeling that they're trying to keep the young person out, but here they were, these older heads, putting me as the head, and that was in 1997. They elected me chairman. And what was great was that I had all the wisdom of these older heads to call on. So all the decisions that I took, and all the activities that we decided to go for, I was able to get their counsel as to who to get involved, who to go and see, and they sort of helped me through the minefield of community politics and how to deal with the local authorities. So I developed a huge amount of knowledge from all these older heads, because each of the chairmen of the different associations were all part of this committee. So we would meet monthly and we would discuss all these things, and they would give me their guidance, and then I would go forward with that guidance. I had a little bit more energy to get things done and to get more people involved, but they had the wisdom and the knowledge that they shared with me, and I thank them for that. And the thing about Culture Week was that I think the centre had gone through a period where, because of developments of other initiatives around, a lot of the things that used to happen at the centre wasn't happening. And so one of the things that we decided to do was that we would bring back as many of the activities as possible. Now that there were some younger people involved, I needed to know about Culture Week and what happened and how people got involved and what it was about, because at that time, I must confess, I didn't know a lot about black history and so on, but it was through my engagement and my involvement with Berry and Culture Week that he showed how the 6 organisations would then put on different events to contribute to Culture Week. So the Jamaica Society would do something, they would cook food, and they would put on things about Jamaica. Also, he would organise a display of Caribbean art. He would commission plays, drama. There'd also be a series of lectures throughout the week with various speakers sometimes from abroad, sometimes from around the country, and people would, there'd be various topics each night, and I could then observe how he would make the contacts and bring all these different people together, and then get the community to come along to experience Culture Week. So I learned how to manage that process, if you like, and become aware of what he did. He also did a play scheme during the summer for the children that weren't in school, during the summer holidays, and I'd observed how he would go around to organisations like Karaoke or Arawak. He had a good friend who's died now, Mrs. Dakakodia. And although you'd feel that they came from different sides of the political spectrum, they were very close in terms of the objectives that they wanted to achieve. And so the organisations that she ran always supported the play schemes that Berry would put on. So he would go around with his cap in hand and collect all these funds from all these organisations and put on the play schemes for the young people. He also ran the youth club. So each night, young people would come and play games. They would have sports, and he had plans to develop the centre further. For a gym, for building higher so we could have more activities. And I suppose the plans are still there, but there was, real vision as to how, we could utilise the venue that was our own to develop, our young people and make sure that they had, a good start in life, even though they might have found themselves in difficult circumstances because of deprivations or difficult families and so on. Through his work at the centre, he was always looking at initiatives, whether through play or through education, to see how the young people could be developed. And he would always rope in volunteers from the community or students that have come from the Caribbean. He'd use them to work in the Saturday school or in the schemes and make sure that some of their knowledge was passed on to these underprivileged young people. Well, being the warden at the centre, if people had difficulties, the first thing they would do is, contact Berry at the centre. And if he couldn't signpost them to people who could help them, he would help them himself. So if someone's child had been excluded from school, he'd go to the school with them and try to get them to be brought back into the school. If sometimes the parents would have problems at work through discrimination, and he would represent them at tribunals. He also organised a range of conferences and seminars at the centre, produced papers on different things, so that would influence policies of the local authorities and other organisations around. So not only did he help on an individual basis, but also in terms of sharing the knowledge and the way you could effect change. He would bring organisations in and help them as well with the information that they were able to gain from these conferences and seminars. So he had a real powerful influence on not only individuals but organisations in the city. One thing that struck me about Berry was his political philosophy. He was a Garveyite, meaning that he respected Marcus Garvey. He read about him, he talked about him a lot, and he tried to emulate a lot of the things that Garvey did. And if you know the history of Marcus Garvey, he mobilised people across the world. He was one of the greatest mobilisers of black people, if not the greatest mobiliser of black people in the 20th. It's the 19th century, isn't it? Or 20th century. And from being in the Caribbean, Berry had sort of followed Garvey. He was also a sportsman, so he was very competitive, very energetic, And I think those are the sorts of things that I'd observed with Berry. And I also knew that, or came to know that Garvey was someone who was very particular about organisation. If we don't have organisations, then we can't achieve as much. And so one of the things that impressed me with Berry was his loyalty to the organisation. He could have easily gone off and did things as Berry Edwards, but he was always championing the WIOCC or other organisations that he was involved in. And so I think that the legacy that he's left for me is that is the importance of supporting an organisation and doing things as an organisation, and having the discipline to work as an organisation. That was so important. Also, the importance of the guidance that he gave, and dealing with the local authorities for a long time. You know, if anybody from the local authority or the police came to the community, everybody would just hold their heads down and let them say whatever they say or do whatever they wanted to do. But this wasn't the case with Berry. If it wasn't right, he'd be up front and he'd be saying, you're not going to do this in this community. And, this was a bit of a surprise to most people, that you could speak to the local authority or the police in that way. But often he was quite right. And I think I learned that from him, and a lot of people around realised that sometimes they didn't have our interests at heart, and they were planning and doing other things that weren't in our interests. And unless you stood up to them and challenged them, then the whole community, or generations of the community would suffer from those decisions. And we can see the things that happened with the Naya Centre, and things where they've built houses, or they had plans and they weren't challenged, and before long those plans meant that the Naya Centre had to close. But in many areas, Berry challenged the local authority. I remember with the carnival, when the local authority wanted to take it over, he challenged them. When the police wanted to stop the route or change the route, he challenged them. And this was a lesson to us that sometimes the answers that they're putting forward are not necessarily the answers that's best for us, and we need to come together as a group, organise ourselves, and do what's right for ourselves, but make sure that we bring other young people along so that they can then carry on the work and keep the legacy going. The main influence I think Berry's had on me is one of confidence in speaking to and dealing with the authorities, and also of education, making people aware of our history and the importance of education. And I think that in some of the initiatives that I've been involved in, I've borrowed a little bit of Berry's strategies, in terms like the carnival. One of the things that we instituted in the carnival was educational workshops about the history of carnival, design, and so on. We changed it from an event where it was just time to party. Not to say we took the partying out of it altogether, but we also made sure that there was education involved in initiatives such as community radio. We made sure that education and awareness of history was an important factor. So his initiatives were within the settings of the community centre and the numbers of people that you could get in the community centres, with me continuing to follow that principle with radio, the setting's much wider in that we have listeners all around the area and now all around the world. So the work goes on, but in a broader way.